Running a learning business today requires attention to growing reach, generating revenue, and demonstrating real impact, all while navigating constant change and fierce competition for learners' time and money.
To help, we've curated a collection of free resources for learning business professionals. You'll find frameworks, briefings, and reports, webinars, and tools focused on strategy, portfolio design, pricing, marketing, and more, all created specifically for organizations that sell continuing education and professional development.
If you care about building a stronger, more sustainable learning business, visit leadinglearning.com/free resources.
That's leadinglearning.com/free resources for practical tools and strategic insight to help you grow your reach, revenue, and impact.
If you want to grow the reach, revenue, and impact of your learning business, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast. Content has never been easier to create, but for learning businesses, that's as much a threat as it is an opportunity, because when everyone can produce polished content quickly, content stops being a differentiator.
Our guest in this episode, number 481, is Panos Siozos, co-founder and CEO of LearnWorlds, whose platform he describes as a business engine for people to create and sell online courses. Panos has spent more than 25 years in the e-learning space, beginning with his doctoral work in educational technology.
In our conversation, Panos traces what has and hasn't changed in digital learning over the past 25 years and makes the case that we're shifting from a content economy to a trust economy, where curation, credentialing, and community are the real differentiators.
You and Panos also discuss how the most successful learning businesses are using AI, not to generate content in bulk, but to scale engagement and personalization in ways that weren't possible before AI.
Yes, and Panos shares his thinking on where learning businesses need to focus in the years ahead, moving from courses to learning ecosystems and rethinking business models to stay relevant in a fast-changing market.
So stick around for Panos' view of where digital learning is headed and what it takes for learning businesses to stand out when everyone has access to the same powerful tools.
So you actually started building a learning platform while you were working on your PhD in education or in learning technology. What was the focus of your PhD?
Yeah, it was educational technology. My particular focus was computer-assisted assessment. My two co-founders were working on other aspects of educational technology. Our first LMS was called EduTech 2000. It used to be futuristic back then, but now I know that it sounds old. And we were trying to create an all-in-one LMS to use in the academic space. But obviously, we started thinking about the potential, what this thing could become. These were, I guess, quite early days for educational technology. Educational technology used to be always a revolution 2, 3, 5 years in the future, but not always being there ready for prime time. So we continued building several e-learning applications in this space as we were working on our postgraduate studies and in various research projects.
And at the time that you were doing that, if you can remember back this far, were there things that you saw digital platforms just weren't doing well at that time that you wanted to address in developing a platform?
I guess engagement is always the main thing. Back then, we didn't have the tools that we have today. Online video was difficult to accommodate in great quality and high speed, but always engagement was the main thing. People were getting access to content. And still today we're getting access to tons of content, but getting the engagement right, getting the completion rates right, getting people to really stick and engage with each other, with the content, with the instructors, that was always the main thing. And as things progress, as we have gone through all this democratization, I guess, of e-learning with access to great platforms, great tools, content now becoming a commodity, this still, for me, is the core issue. Being able to create this engagement and have people really commit to what they're doing and get not just access to the content, but go through this transformational change that learning should be about.
And so I wonder, engagement is still out there as an issue. You still hear people talk about engagement an awful lot. So that still is something, that a holy grail, so to speak. What would you say has changed since those early days that has improved substantially, that we have really gotten right, that maybe we weren't in the late 90s, early 2000s about digital learning?
I think we have speed. We have all these tools that allow us to create, to launch courses, experiences, learning platforms at scale. You remember how it used to be, like even 5, definitely 10 years ago, when you had to duct tape several tools just to be able to launch a platform or to launch a learning experience. Now the platforms are there. You can launch an online course in a couple of hours if you have the content. The tools are there. Definitely AI helps us with speed of creation, repurposing the content, translating the content, personalizing the content. So this is really there. Also, the scale is there now. So distribution allowed us to really, in some cases, create global, always-on experiences. 10 years ago, people were very happy if they were launching a course to 100 people or 500 people or 1,000 people. Now, we are able, at least in LearnWorlds, to power some online course platforms that have more than 1 million students. These are amazing numbers, things that we couldn't really imagine when we were starting. And also, the expectations have changed a lot. And now, like, premium, high quality content is there. Choice is taken for granted. Everybody's going for this Netflix style experience where you can just, turn on your learning channel and have access to anything that you ever wanted to learn. So these are the things that have changed. On the other hand, as we said, the core of what is learning is not the consumption of learning or the access to learning, is the interaction, is the engagement. Learning, just because we have all these tools and all these affordances, doesn't mean that learning is easier. Learning is still difficult. You still need to engage with the content. You still need to sweat. It's a muscle. It doesn't happen just because you got access to some impressive platforms or to some great content out there. People still need the motivation. They still need to get the engagement right, to have their incentives at the right place. They still need the community to strive together. Learning, I consider learning to be a team sport, a social endeavor, not just something that you do in isolation. So these things remain the same, and I believe they will continue to be even in the era of AI.
A lot of threads there that I want to pick up on. I'll start with just the whole idea that speed and scale, just getting content online has become so much easier than it used to be. I mean, I can remember I worked for an e-learning company back in the mid-90s, and it was a big deal to put together a course and get it online. Now you can do it in a few minutes. But I think a lot of organizations are now confusing just putting content online with, having a thriving digital learning business. I mean, what do you see the most successful organizations doing that the less successful ones aren't? We tend to talk in terms of 3 terms here at Leading Learning: reach, revenue, and impact. So when you think about learning businesses that are achieving reach, they're reaching their learners, they're generating revenue, they're having impact, what are they doing that the less successful ones don't?
I think the smarter businesses and the ones that eventually succeed are the ones that are fast. They're shipping content fast. Their courses, they're not perfectionists. They're not sitting on a course for 6 months until they get it absolutely perfect. What they do is they ship it quickly, even if it's not perfect, but then they iterate constantly. They learn from the market, from their learners, from their audience. They stay close to customers, to their learners, in order to be able to learn. So it cannot just be a broadcast type experience. You need to maintain these relationships. And at the end of the day, they manage to build ecosystems. I think you call it communities. You've talked a lot about building communities around the courses. They manage to build communities around their content, because content is just one part. It's the content, it's the community, the people who are there, staying close and engaged with your customers, offering to them support so that you can still learn from them in order to adapt your courses and to create the next best thing and the next iteration. So it's not a one kind of release, once a year. It's a constant iterative process of launching, tweaking, and being close to your customers. So it's like every other, I guess, digital product or software. You have to be there. You have to constantly keep learning, have these feedback loops, and continue to improve your offering.
Running a learning business today requires attention to growing reach, generating revenue, and demonstrating real impact, all while navigating constant change and fierce competition for learners' time and money.
To help, we've curated a collection of free resources for learning business professionals. You'll find frameworks, briefings, and reports, webinars, and tools focused on strategy, portfolio design, pricing, marketing, and more, all created specifically for organizations that sell continuing education and professional development.
If you care about building a stronger, more sustainable learning business, visit leadinglearning.com/free resources.
That's leadinglearning.com/free resources for practical tools and strategic insight to help you grow your reach, revenue, and impact. I've watched some of the big MOOC providers like the Coursera's and the edX, and back in the original days of the massive open online courses, the MOOCs, they were very community driven. It really was people coming together, and the community almost preceded the content in many ways and often led to the content. The reverse seems to have happened as those companies have gotten big. They got a whole bunch of content, but the community has dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. It's just not there anymore. Is that inevitable, or do you see paths for successful learning businesses to maintain engagement, to maintain community, even as they scale and reach more and more learners?
A great observation. It is difficult when you grow, but I think this is where, for me, this is the ultimate use case for something like AI that allows you to massively personalize and massively make, very, very specific, provide very specific feedback that otherwise would have been lost in a massive community. So I guess for communities, there is kind of a critical mass and the Goldilocks zone where they work. If they're too small, they can't work. If they're too big, it's not a community anymore. It's it's an agora. It's like something that is huge. So that's where you need to, I guess, break things, segment, create these communities that feel personal, that feel safe spaces, that have the right volume, that also bring together people with complementary needs and complementary skills, and where you can offer to them the personalized feedback, create the interactivity, the interactive learning that they need. Something like this happens in a traditional classroom. It's something that a traditional teacher can do when they have a classroom of 30 people. You cannot do that with 300 people, and definitely you cannot do that with 300,000 people. But that's where tools like AI can help us create content and engagement in an efficient way. And engagement is what will scale the results at the end. Because if we just use AI to scale content, we're just adding more slope to the planet, and we're just adding things there that cannot be consumed on their own. But if we are able to, using AI, to scale engagement, that's where we can bring in the results, and that's where we can maintain this sense of, I'm in a safe space with the right people and engaging with the right kind of content, and I can drive forward with my skills and cover the needs of myself or my organization.
Right. You may not have visibility into this, and feel free to say it if you don't, but I'm wondering, when you see organizations implement your platform, I mean, they've obviously got people who are creating courses, deploying the courses, tracking the data and that sort of thing. Do they tend to have somebody who is focused on, responsible for community, for engagement when they deploy the platform?
Not always. Depending on where they come from, if they approach it with a content angle, they feel that if they just publish the best possible content out there, it will just become a flywheel on its own, and it will fly. And we try to convince them that they cannot afford to forget this. This is what will create the feedback loop. Investing in the community, which is difficult. We know that it needs, it needs effort. You need to reach that critical mass that we were saying. But content enough, it's not alone. It's not sufficient. Especially now, at some point, AI might take over this. and provide, I guess, some kinds of this experience. But for now, it's not there. You need the person, the people in the middle of that to provide this kind of support experience and engagement.
And for the organizations that are using AI, and I know you've got a number of AI tools built into and really integrated into your platform at this point, and we're seeing that with a lot of platforms now, and their freestanding tools that help you with all sorts of different versions of productivity. Mainly, I mean, where are you seeing AI really have a positive impact? Where organizations have figured out how to use it effectively, not just to churn out more content, but to do things that really do impact their learning businesses. And where are they still struggling from your perspective in figuring out how AI can actually be productive for them?
First of all, just to say that here in LearnWorlds, from the very beginning, we were introducing AI as a support mechanism, not just outsource things to AI, prompt something, and then let AI create courses or anything else. We don't think that it's ready for that, or it should be used for something like this. So we try to prompt and to have AI on the side, like an instructional design assistant, somebody who can just help you not just create a bunch of content, but the right content for the right interaction, for the right activity with this kind of instructional design mindset. What we see from successful organizations is that, of course, AI can have a strong impact on the content creation, accelerate the content creation. And this can be very important in our days because things are moving so fast. The half-life of content is shrinking. So sometimes you need to be able to react to market needs very, very fast. You need to bring a course to the market very quickly. Software is changing so fast. Products are changing so fast. Processes are changing. So sometimes this also can be extremely important. Repurposing the content, iterating fast on the content and getting all this feedback from thousands of users and trying to create the next version. AI can help you digest all this and prioritize and help you design the next version. Translating in some cases, or creating these personalized learning flows that would have been impossible in a high-scale environment. Right now, just to give you one example from the LearnWorlds experience, where you might create 100-question multiple-choice test with questions of varying levels of difficulty based on the Bloom taxonomy, and then you have 1,000 people going through that exam. How can you provide personalized feedback to all these tens of thousands of combinations of answers without having something that AI that can go in and tell you precisely where you did wrong and where the right answer in the text can be found, or something like that? That's something, these personalized learning flows can only happen with AI. So we see lots of potential there. Organizations that understand how to use that, they can get a significant advantage. Where we see lots of hype and people just thinking that they can outsource learning, they can get fully autonomous learning just by AI or by using a few prompts, that they can just replace instructional design by doing some smart prompting, kind of a lovable for instructional design. That's not there. And especially for the audience here that is very much focused on continuing professional education and certifications and all this stuff, AI cannot provide the validation of learning at this moment, the trust that is needed, the man in the middle, the validating all the knowledge and making sure that it's up to the standards. That's something that cannot happen at this point. So there we still believe that obviously the humans are needed. So AI can be a powerful assistant, but it cannot be a learning system right now, and not for years to come.
We are at that point now where there's that sort of old saying, I think William Gibson said it, that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. I mean, we're moving pretty quickly to the point where everybody will have much more comfort with AI tools, just like everybody can use Zoom now, when they hardly knew what it was 5-10 years ago. So we'll get to that point where we have, smart people with very smart tools, AI, making very smart content. And you can see in any given profession, industry, whatever, the competition can get pretty fierce around content, like high quality content that's out there. What do you think? I mean, if you get to that point, because I think a lot of our listeners are probably going to find themselves there if they're not there already, how do you stand out in that kind of market as a digital learning provider?
You have to move to higher levels of value. I think we've seen similar things happening in the past. Like 10, 15 years ago, people were saying, who is ever going to create online courses when we have the massive MOOCs and the best professors in the world teaching about marketing or teaching about everything else? And then we had YouTube. So how you can compete with that? People were saying you just go to YouTube, you will find a video about everything. But all these things, what were they missing? They were missing the curation. With all these massive amounts of higher quality content, how do you know that you know the things that you should know? Like, how do you know what's the path that you should follow in order to become an accomplished professional in your field? How can you gain trust in your knowledge? How can the people who hire you have the trust that you have the skills? Who can assess this knowledge? And also the community part that we're saying, it's not just one person on their own accessing a bunch of knowledge. Is there somewhere a professional community of like-minded people that go through the same learning experience like me, who can be my co-workers, who can be my competitors, who can be the people who will motivate them? So who is the professional or the company who will manage to create that kind of community? They will have a huge advantage. Everybody will have the content, but what about the trust, the curation, the personal brand, the professional brand, the community of people that will be there? And also, I guess, proving to your audience and to your students that the learning outcomes can be created through your content and your experience and all the things that are out there. This is where I guess things will move. Content becoming a commodity, as we said, the half-life of content becoming increasingly smaller. So I guess we're moving from an attention economy and a content economy to a trust economy, where you will try to find who are the experts in this field. And in some cases, it might be the universities, it might be the corporations, it might be the big brands, or just the people who are extremely knowledgeable in their field. They're moving very, very fast. They're producing top-line content, but also they have created this mode that's not just content, but also the curation, the trust, the presence, the support, the community around them. I understand that this might sound a bit vague, but I guess it's the validation and the trust is going to be increasingly very, very important in this kind of ever-present, high-quality content.
Yeah, multiple parts to it. It used to be in our world, that if you were a certain type of provider, you could just crank out the webinars, record somebody doing their presentation, keep putting those out, and that's declined significantly as a way to succeed, at least in the marketplace. Are you seeing your customers or just other organizations you're aware of doing more with micro-credentialing, other forms of validation to, as you said, you talked about trust, so you got to sort of be able to verify. That can certainly help with that.
We see more and more of that. And also, again, because content is becoming a commodity, so much more things to learn about. A massive, I guess, certification is not scalable. It might not be relevant. So we see micro-learning, micro-resources, micro-credentials, all these things where people can just mix and match and create their own learning paths and gather the things and the signals that they need for themselves or for their employers, for their organizations, for their associations. I think this is becoming this is the output that we are seeing, the things that we are seeing out there. Learning becoming not just continuous, ever-present, omnipresent. It has to happen at every single hour of the day, but also learning increasingly being not just the consumption of content, but some kind of trust signal coming along with that content. So these micro credentials, all these things are becoming the norm. And we see that, and that's something also that we facilitate through LearnWorlds. We see the most successful, I guess, course providers doing things like that.
And when you look out 3 to 5 years, to the extent that anybody can, see out that far, as you see learning technology evolving, what sorts of opportunities have you most excited? Where do you think somebody who's leading a learning business really needs to be focusing their attention to make sure that 3 to 5 years out they're still going to be relevant, they're still going to be thriving as a learning business?
Yes, and like as they say, making predictions is difficult, especially about the future.
At the future, yeah.
So, yeah. So I guess I'm trying, to read lots of science fiction, not just Gibson, but everybody else, to really just try to open my mind about what might be possible out there. So 5 years might be too much. So let's say about in the next 3 years. As we were saying, content becoming a commodity. So now we are moving from courses to learning ecosystems, which is not just the content, but it's also the community. It's also the trust that comes along with that, and the things that an organization needs to build. It's about thinking more about the learning experience and how this translates in the different environments and how realistic this can be, because I also believe that the realistic learning is also going to be a big part of that, and enabling these learning experiences. And I guess also in situ, where learning happens. All organizations will have to think more about not having learning as an isolated path or an isolated instance or something that happens once a year, once every few months. Learning has to be always on. 24/7, you will need access to this very realistic micro learning experience and micro certificates or signals of trust out there that will allow you to accomplish your goals, your objectives anytime they're needed. So the future is not going to be about more content. We already have that, or faster content, or better courses, or more courses. It's about learning ecosystems that are very organic, iterative, fast, and adapting to the needs of the learners. This is, I guess, it might sound a bit abstract, but we see that that's the combination, and already learning businesses should start thinking about this way. So it's not longer about having the right learning management system. It's not longer about having, the kind of high quality polished courses. Everybody will have that. It's about how you build your own learning ecosystem, how you invent your own business model that will allow you to stay at the forefront of innovation. We see out there huge amount of innovation in the business models that people employ, in how they create content, how they distribute content, how learning becomes not just a medium, but in some cases a huge catalyst for their businesses, whatever they might be doing. So I think these are, I guess, some lines of thought for our audience here.
In terms of business model innovation, I mean, is this things like, is it subscriptions? Is it customer training related to other product offerings, or what sorts of things do you have in mind?
I think it's already beyond that. I mean, we've seen in the past years, and I'm sure you followed all these, going from the individual courses to the subscription plans to the, I guess, Netflix and the SaaSification of online courses, where you have all these different subscription models. But we are seeing even more things. For me, education is the best form of marketing that you can do for all sorts of businesses. So we are seeing consulting businesses that start to add learning on the side as a byproduct. We see learning businesses that become consulting businesses, customer education increasingly becoming a huge factor for whether you are selling a software or a service or a product or anything else. So I guess like training customers also means retaining customers. So we see things that people didn't used to consider as standalone businesses or being relevant to learning. Now learning is relevant to everything. So it's all around things that we do. So we're seeing lots of new ideas coming out there.
Well, we always like to ask guests, particularly somebody like yourself who has, the academic, intellectual background in learning, but you're also an entrepreneur, and you have to keep up and evolve and, build a company day in and day out. How do you approach your own learning? What are some of the things you do to kind of keep you on top of your game?
Well, here in LearnWorlds, our motto is getting better every single day, and we're trying to stay very humble. I guess that's the academic background. We know that we know nothing, as Socrates, the Greek philosopher, used to say. So we are eating our own dog food. We're trying to stay close to academic conferences and business conferences, reading papers, anything that has to do with instructional design, especially now with how AI is transforming instructional design. These are things that we are trying always to keep very close to us. Not all of this can be not all of this academic, I guess, input can be transposed into a business environment, but it's very useful for thinking and for understanding how things might evolve out there. So we're trying to get the academic input, but also to ground it on the real needs of our customers. So half of the input definitely comes from our customers that are out there. LearnWorlds now has more than 13,000 customers. Huge amount of input in the things that they do, how they evolve, what are the challenges that they're facing every day, how they're using AI, what's the competition that they're facing. Who is the competition that they're facing? Because they're not just competing against other providers that are selling online courses. In some cases, they're competing directly against the LLMs that their potential customers might be using. So we're trying to use all this input and make sense of it and understand where the market is going, how with our own platform we can offer solutions to these customers, and what are the things that we should be building.
That's the end of our conversation with Panos Siozos, CEO of LearnWorlds. But stay with us another moment to catch our recap.
You'll find show notes and a transcript for this episode at leadinglearning.com/episode 481, along with links to Panos' profile on LinkedIn and to the LearnWorlds site, where you can explore the platform and start a free trial.
If you find the Leading Learning podcast valuable, we would be grateful if you'd spread the word to others who may benefit.
Panos opened by reflecting on what's changed and what hasn't in digital learning over the last 25 years. The tools are faster and more powerful than ever, but engagement remains the core challenge, getting learners to truly commit and not just access content.
Panos said we're moving from a content economy to a trust economy, and that certainly jibes with our view and our own focus on credibility capital. What sets successful learning businesses apart is curation, credentialing, community, and the trust that comes with them.
On AI specifically, Panos drew an important distinction. Using AI to scale content is just adding more noise. The real opportunity is using AI to scale engagement, personalized feedback, adaptive learning flows, and experiences that feel human even at massive scale.
And looking ahead, Panos sees the future belonging not to courses, but to learning ecosystems, always on, iterative, and built around trust signals like micro-credentials.
Thanks again for listening. See you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.